Hey, it's David. Let's talk about chain maintenance. There are three areas of chain maintenance: cleaning, adjustment, and wear. Now, wear is basically when you do need to replace the chain. There are a couple of factors there. We'll cover them at the end. So let's dig in to the chain cleaning. I'm just going to quickly summarize from my main video on chain cleaning because that's quite long. Don't use solvents on this. Don't use a degreaser unless you're throwing the chain away, of course, especially if you've got an O-ring chain on here, because that will just damage them. You can get specialist chain cleaners. KTM recommend a Moto chain cleaner. I just use common or garden engine oil. Normally wash it off with a hose and then use a small brush, toothbrush or similar, and just get in there and give it a clean. That's really all that's required. How often you do it is up to you. It depends if you've got a show bike. It depends how dirty the chain gets when you're riding. Are you riding in winter with salt and dirty roads where there's lots of grit getting into the chain? Periodically, you are going to want to remove the chain guard to clean up under here, and also the front sprocket cover to clean in there, because they will get oily and dirty, and that will allow you to get under here and clean out the chain slider, this plastic piece here, check it's not worn through and so forth, and just get in and do a bit of a deep clean in this area. And certainly if you're going to change the chain of sprockets, it's a good time to do it. You may want to protect your tyre from getting oil on it at this point, or just clean the tyre off, make sure after you're done. Having gone round once, give the chain a clean with a cloth. Never be tempted to clean the chain by running the engine. That's just a recipe for losing your fingers. It will happen, so don't ever be tempted to do that. And repeat this process as many times as you need to get yourself happy with how clean your chain is. If you want to see just how dirty it is in here, we just need to pull this cover off. That's not too bad in there, a little bit dirty down there. That'll clean up easy enough. Not too bad inside here, that'll clean up okay. Now if we want to take the front sprocket off, it's just these two nuts. Rotate this piece here, that comes off, sprocket comes off, and don't forget your spacer that sits up here. For the chain guard, it's very similar. You've got a bolt here, you've got a bolt here that sits behind here. So one there, one here, and again one there. It's almost inevitable you'll have got some oil and stuff on the tyre here, so make sure that you actually clean it off properly, especially where it's caught down into the actual tread, and anywhere around the rear wheel where that oil is going to get thrown up onto the tyre. So with the chain cleaning done, let's move on to the adjustment. Now KTM have a slightly unusual way of measuring the slack in the chain and how much adjustments it needs. So let's just check that out. Fortunately, if you've still got the stock mud guard, you should have a little diagram showing you how it works. Now we can see the diagram just here. The process is really quite simple. What they're saying is you pick this part of the chain arm, and what they're suggesting you do is you simply, with the bike in neutral and with the top chain taut, so no slack in it, what you do is you press up here and see how much gap you have between the frame and the chain, or the swinging arm and the chain. And what they're saying is you should have 5 to 7 millimeters. First thing we need to do is establish the tightest point in the chain. That's quite tight there, slacker there, tighter here. Moving on to chain wear. If you've got a chain that's got tight points and slack points in it, it's nearly always an indication of a worn chain, and often it's because the chain has been allowed to go rusty, not been lubed properly, and so forth. So some of the links are effectively damaged in some parts of the chain, which allows the chain to be slacker. Now here, that is going all the way up until it hits on the slider block there. But here, it's got much tighter. So you should always check chain tension on the tightest part of the chain, because otherwise, if you do it on the loose part of the chain, then there'll be parts of the chain that are really tight and it will cause stress and strain on your transmission and cause damage to the bike. I've marked this in 5mm increments. 5mm will be this much, another 2mm will be slightly more, and that's 10mm. So the chain, top of this chain, should go somewhere between these marks towards the top. If it goes to the 10, the chain is too tight. If it's above the 5, the chain is too slack. So this is coming up to about the 5. So it's 5, maybe 6. So how do you adjust it? So first things first is to slacken this nut off. Easier to do it when it's wheels solidly on the ground than when you've got it sitting up in midair. So with that backed off, take the tension off the nut. To tighten the chain, we need to move the axle back this way. What we have here is a bolt, you can see, screws through here, and on here there's a lock nut. All this does is it holds this in place, it locks it in place. So we don't need to worry about this aside from loosening and tightening it. To tighten the chain, and don't forget my chain is a hair too slack, maybe it's just on the borderline. To tighten it, I want to push this back, but I've got one of these on both sides and they must be in exactly the same place. You can see these indents in here, and you've got these notches here. So we can see this one, for example, is just here on this notch. If we go around the other side, we should see that that's in about the same place. To adjust these, what we do is we keep this in place so it can't move, and we loosen the lock nut. Alright, so we've kept this spanner in place. Sorry, the caster's getting in the way of my videoing here. And we can just slacken off the lock nut. Now, this axle bolt is loose. I'm going to do the same on the other side. To increase the tension on the chain, we just actually move this a little bit this way. And I can see on here that the edge of this notch is just lining up with the edge of that notch. So I'm I'll make the same adjustment on the other side. So let's see how that worked. So let's just quickly net this back up so it doesn't move on us. And when I recheck our measurements, I've over tightened it a little bit. Now, as it happens, I'm about to change this chain, but let's just say that I've now set it correctly. We need to actually tighten these back up. We've made sure they're the same on both sides. So we don't want the bolt to move. So we put our spanner on here and we don't let that bolt head move. Just tighten that back up, and then we need to tighten the lock nut up. But we want to do it without moving this. So this spanner shouldn't move. And the easy way to tighten lock nuts is to hold the spanners like this. And so without moving this one, just pull up with this one with your fingers, and that's enough. It's all the force that's required. We do the same on the other one, and we double check that we haven't moved. We make sure our axle is pinched up again. So that's not going to move. Take it back off the stand so that we can torque it up. And this torques up to 98 Newton meters. So we just work our way up to that. And that's done. So we've done chain cleaning and we've done chain adjustment. Final thing we need to mention is chain wear. Now I've already mentioned tight spots and loose spots, and that's a good sign your chain is on its way out if it hasn't already worn out. If you've correctly maintained your chain throughout its life, eventually it will get longer, and it gets longer for the same reason you get tight spots and loose spots, which is that those pins that go through the chain to join the links together, the actual links themselves, that metal plate, that's not going to move, that's not going to stretch. But where the pin goes through it, it wears. The pin wears and the plate wears around that actual pin. So eventually this wear will make the chain longer because there's now slack between the link and the pin. When it reaches a certain length, it's time to replace it. If you've got bad loose spots and tight spots, it's probably also time to replace it. And if you're changing the chain, normally you change the sprockets at the same time, because unless for example, you've just ruined a chain very quickly on new sprockets. But even then, a worn chain will wear your sprockets very quickly. So normal practice is chain and sprockets. It's just the common, I would say it's the common sense solution, unless you have some special reason not to do it. So how do you measure the wear? It's quite easy, I'll just show you. What you'll need is a ruler. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to put this ruler here so I know my starting point is, and I'm going to count pins. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. This and that are my start points. So if I put this halfway on here, so the measurement is 30.16 from the center of the pin to the center of the pin. This chain has reached its wear point. Basically, if it's 30 centimeters, then the chain has worn out. Even though the bike has only done a couple of thousand miles, the chain was certainly rusty when I bought the bike, which is always a bad sign. So this, I think, just confirms that this chain has had it. So that's chain maintenance in a nutshell. Cleaning, adjusting, and has the chain worn out. And as we've seen, if you don't clean your chain properly, if you don't maintain it properly, then it ends up like this one, which is a brand new bike with a worn out chain. You saw just there were tight spots and loose spots in there. This has had it. It's going to come off. Now I'd already planned to take it off, so that doesn't bother me, but it would be annoying to spend that much money on changing sprockets just because of poor maintenance. So thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.